The sky had not been honest in a long time. It wore a bruise of iron and smoke that never quite cleared, an endless, washed-out twilight that made noon look like dusk. On day 150 of this war, the horizon is a jagged line of blackened trees and the skeletal ribs of cities. Heat hangs in the air like a held breath. Storms come without warning, not with soft rain, but with angry, acidic slashes that eat paint and lungs alike. Where I sit and speak into this cracked microphone used to be a neighborhood with groceries and a bus stop. Now the grocery is a hollow frame. Its aisles collapsed into nesting places for rats and bits of cans. The bus stop sign is a shard of twisted metal pointing at nothing. Downtown, the landmarks, once proud, now anonymous, sit like monuments to a time we can no longer afford to remember. A courthouse with its clock tower stopped at the hour the power failed. A stadium that is more rust than concrete. An interstate where cars are frozen in a rusting traffic jam that stretches like the spine of a dead animal. Bridges are down. Suburbs have become dust bowls. Riverbeds that once fed whole towns are cracked and canted like broken pottery. This is not just war. The fighting fractured our maps, but the climate finished the picture. The rivers ran thin for years and then stopped. Rain, when it falls, carries a metallic tang and the kind of sickness that gets into the marrow. Wildfires sweep faster than they used to, thinner vegetation, tinder dry neighborhoods, and winds that change directions like traitors. We have flash flood scars across places that last year were parched. The ground there turned to glass and mud in the same breath. The coastline has moved where it pleases. Towns we thought secure found themselves swallowed by a sea that forgot the rules. Weather is no longer a backdrop. It's a weapon the planet uses to remind us we borrowed its patience and squandered it. What's left of government feels like a rumor you half remembered before sleep. The federal colors still flap sometimes on abandoned flagpoles, but the institutions that ran a country, power grids, supply chains, hospitals, and courts, have either been commandeered, burned out, or turned into something else entirely. There are no more routine shipments of medicine. The last bank I saw had its vault door pried open and was full of nothing but paper and mice. The internet is a faded constellation. Most of us live on what we can catch with a scavenged radio or the whispered networks of runners and caravans. Survivor groups stitch themselves into new structures. There are the caravans, long clanking trains of people moving like slow storms, carrying everything they own and everything they fear. They trade heat for food, stories for spare parts. There are the towns that manage to inoculate themselves against complete collapse. Walled hamlets where old middle managers, nurses, and farmers try to enforce rules that might keep children alive. Then there are the factions, the men and women who found power in scarcity. Raiders in pickup trucks with boarded windows and weapon racks prowl routes once marked on GPS, demanding tolls for water or fuel. Militias set up roadblocks and call them checkpoints. Some call themselves protection, others call themselves kings. Institutions that survived did so by becoming smaller, meaner versions of themselves. The last functioning clinic in our area is no longer a hospital. It's a tent with a solar repeater and a volunteer nurse who learned how to stitch by reading 2 medical textbooks and watching a lot of YouTube before the towers fell silent. Schools meet occasionally in basements. Libraries become grain stores and film reels are traded like gold and gilt. The radio network, the few remaining transmitters patched into generators and jury-rigged antennas, has become a lifeline. We send out frequencies like flares, and people answer from places we cannot name. The economy is a barter economy of grudges and gratitude. Canned peaches are worth more than a polite lie. A working gas can might buy a week's worth of silence from a raider. Skills are currency. Someone who can distill water is a person of consequence. Someone who can fix a carburetor is a celebrity. We hoard what matters: seeds, medicine, batteries, a tooth for a tooth. We trade stories the way our grandparents traded letters. Each story a transaction, each truth a rare commodity. Sound has changed too. The city doesn't hum, it coughs. At night you can hear distant engines, convoys or thunder, it's hard to tell. Then a silence that presses your ears like a fist. Dogs that survive the early hard times are lean and watchful. They learn faces faster than we do. Children exist in pockets, half wild and fiercely tender, carrying dolls wrapped in laundry and hope folded small in their hands. Anxiety is the currency of our days. You learn to listen for the wrong kind of silence, the silence that follows a fight. You learn to check the sky like you would check a wound. The anticipation of the next disaster, weather-driven or human-made, settles in your bones and never leaves. We ration optimism the way we ration water, sparingly, with ceremony. Even in this bleakness, signs of life poke through the rubble. A stubborn garden on a rooftop, tended by hands that refuse to give up. A school chalkboard turned into a market board, today's offerings. 2 eggs, a jar of pickled beans, 1 map. A radio signal that answers our transmission with a laugh and a voice we recognize. The planet is angry, and our machines are failing, and men are being cruel. But among the ruins there are small, absurd arrangements of hope. They are quiet, fragile, and possibly foolish. But for now, foolishness is a type of courage, and courage is one of the only things that still seems to grow. So I describe what I see because someone has to witness it. If you're out there listening, know this. The world we knew is gone, but life isn't. It's different, scarred, reticent, rearranged, but so are we. And that ugly and stubbornly human is a beginning of something, even if we don't yet know what. They used to call me a lot of things before the maps burned. Neighbor, coworker, the man who fixed the church's old lawnmower. My name is Mateo Cruz, though names mean different things now. Sometimes they're a promise, sometimes a list of debts. I say it because I remember that somewhere once words held weight. I say it because a voice tied to a name is easier to trust when the air is full of liars. I run this little transmitter from what used to be a second-floor walk-up above a shuttered bakery. The oven is gone. The racks were taken by scavengers looking for metal. What remains is a room of jury-rigged comforts. A pedal generator I can coax into singing when my knees hurt. An old ham radio I taught myself to speak into. And a stack of batteries that smell faintly of burnt sugar. My microphone is taped. The pop filter is a scrap of stocking. The antenna is a coat hanger and a prayer. It's laughable if you let yourself laugh. I don't. Survival is a ledger. It's a list that shrinks and grows depending on the day. Water is at the top. I've got a 2-stage filter I cobbled from a hardware store pump, ceramic elements, and charcoal I baked from old hardwood. I keep a small solar still under the counter, a jury-rigged dome that sips whatever the city will give. Condensation from leaky pipes, a little runoff after the acidic rains. The still gives me a liter or 2 on good mornings. Nights are for collecting dew if the wind will allow it. Shade helps. You learn to treasure the angles of sunlight the same way houses once treasured rooms. Food is next in that ledger. I barter for canned beans when I can find a convoy that isn't being watched. I swap radio time for preserves. You let me broadcast your message, and I teach you how to pressure can tomatoes. I have a rooftop garden, 3 plastic tubs with a stubborn patch of basil, chard, and a single tomato vine that's refused to die. It's not much, it's sacred. Seeds are currency and memory. I traded away a packet of my wife's heirloom corn seeds once for antibiotics when the cough took her. I still carry the memory of that packet in my chest like an accusation. Shelter is about concealment and warmth. My windows are boarded with plywood scavenged from a church pew. The boards creak with the wind, and sometimes I lie awake convincing myself that the house is still alive. I sleep in layers because the nights bite. A wool blanket and a sleeping bag lined with emergency foil will make a kind of fortress. I keep the doors chained from the inside and the external noise down. Shutters closed. Generator quieted when movement is near. Raiders learned sound long before they learned mercy. Tools and trade skills are the difference between a name and a number. I can fix a carburetor, mend a nylon strap, rethread a needle, splice wire, skills that were hobbies until the world rewired itself around necessity. I learned to suture a cut from an old military manual someone passed through the radio. I learned to read the sky from the survivors who could still name wind directions by the smell of dust. Each skill is a coin I can spend to buy another day. What keeps me moving? The answer changes like the weather. Some mornings it is responsibility toward a voice on the air, toward people who write in with a story or a question and signatures I cannot see. There's a woman named June who sends a shortwave burst every other day, a single note. Still here. I reply with a weather report and a joke. She answers with a recipe for flatbread. It's not much. It is everything. Other times it is memory, or the absence of it. I keep broadcasting because silence feels like surrender. My wife, Lena, used to say I should write everything down. She kept journals in neat, cramped handwriting. After she died, after the fever took her and the clinic couldn't scrape together a dose of the right pill, I read those pages like a map back to a world I had lost. They became my scripts. When the war took the power and the trucks started burning, I thought my voice would drown in the smoke. Instead, I found a microphone and a reason to speak. Guilt is a constant companion. I replay decisions like bad radio signals. 2 extra liters of water I chose to give to a convoy that never returned. The packet of seeds I traded away. Sometimes guilt sounds like a practical lesson. Don't trust the man who smiles too much. Don't go alone into the South Quarter. Sometimes it is quieter, a dull ache under my ribs. I keep myself awake at night with these confessions because sleep lets the past rearrange itself into convenient lies. Loss is the shape of my life now. Lena is a star I can name but not touch. Our son, Mateo Jr., disappeared in the early Exodus, either taken by a militia that called themselves a rescue group or simply swallowed by the road. I hold both possibilities against my chest like a coin I can't spend. My mother's house is a pile of shifted bricks. The photos were burned for warmth during one of those first bad winters. Names of friends live in the ledger on the back of an envelope next to a sketch of the solar still. Each name has an address, a last known location, and the word that best describes how they left. Gone, taken, bartered. Loneliness is not the absence of people but the thinning of meaning. Sometimes survivors gather under a provisional awning and share coffee heated from a camp stove. And for an hour we remember what the world felt like when schedules mattered and children went to school. Those hours are loud and dangerous and precious. Other times I sit in the dark, the radio off, and realize I have said more to strangers over the air than to anyone who sleeps under my roof, because the roof is a memory now, and the people who slept under it are not. There are choices I make every morning that feel like prayers and bargains. I decide who I will help when someone knocks, if I will trade the spare battery for a story or for a pair of boots. I decide whether to risk trading with a convoy reported 2 miles north, knowing the raiders learned that route yesterday. I decide whether to broadcast a warning that might bring help and attract trouble in equal measure. Each decision is a calculus of risk versus the human weights on the other side. I have fear. It lives in the small hairline cracks of my body, a twitch in my hand when a truck passes, a knot when the sky turns the wrong color. I have knowledge that helps negotiate that fear, how to hide a generator from scent, how to move without leaving a sound, how to use an old radio timetable to falsify my signature to a bad sort of convoy. Knowledge is armor. Knowledge is also loneliness. Knowing how to do something that the person at the door does not can mean a life saved or a life bartered. Yet for all of that, hope anchors me in ways guilt never can. Hope is not the loud, cinematic hope of movies. It is the small, stubborn belief that a person can cook more beans than they eat, that a garden can outrun a season, that a child can learn to read under a lamplight fed by a solar cell. I hold hope like a match, quickly, carefully, and with respect. When a listener calls in and says their grandmother survived the night because of a tip I gave on boiling water, It is a tiny victory that feels larger than everything else. When someone broadcasts back and says a convoy made it through because of our warning, I sleep with fewer shakes in my hands. There are rituals that keep me human. I broadcast at dusk because Lena loved the colors then. I read out names on the first Thursday of every month, names of people who asked to be remembered on air. I keep a jar where people leave trinkets, a button, a child's drawing, a strip of fabric. I wind the pedal generator like a clock and talk into the mic as if telling a story could sew the world back together. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I keep doing it because a string of attempts is the only law this new world seems to honor. If this is the ledger of my life, the columns are simple: sustain, remember, help. I spend my days keeping those columns balanced. I am tired in ways language barely touches, and sometimes my voice cracks and the broadcast cuts out. But when I come back on, there is always someone listening. That is where my duty lives, in answering the silence with a voice that remembers names, that gives practical advice on how to filter water, how to treat a fever with what you have, or how to barter without giving away the most important thing, your dignity. I am a survivor, yes. But what I have become is more than the sum of what I carry or what I lose. I am a signal. I am a ledger. I am a man who cannot fix everything but can pass on what has been learned. If the world has become a long, slow test of who keeps caring, then I will spend my days trying to pass whatever I can forward. I will speak until my throat gives out, and I will listen until there is no one left to answer. And when that day comes, if it comes, I will hope that somebody somewhere remembers the sound of a voice that refused to fall silent. The storm had no name anymore. Once, storms had categories, forecasts, and radar tracks on glowing screens, men and women in suits pointing with reassuring confidence to animated maps that told us when to shelter and when it would all be over. Now there was no end. There was only the sky cracking open, day after day, hurling its rage against what was left of the earth. It began as drought, years of withering crops, rivers shriveling into muddy scars, the soil breaking apart into something more like ash than earth. Then the fires came, feeding on the dryness, turning forests to cinder and pushing waves of smoke that blackened the lungs of those too stubborn or too weak to flee. When the rain finally returned, it did not fall as life-giving water but as a weapon. Sheets of acid-laden downpour, carried by storms whose winds shredded metal and ripped concrete from foundations. Every time lightning tore across the horizon, we wondered if we would live to hear the next strike. I live with the storms now. They are not background noise, not weather. They are the pulse of the world, the rhythm by which we measure our lives. My days are filled with the groaning of tin roofs against the pressure of wind, the shriek of broken glass sucked into the air, the choking taste of salt when the sea forces itself inland. There is no safe season, no predictable cycle. Survival has become a constant negotiation with the sky. We've adapted in the smallest, most pitiful ways. Plastic tarps strung across splintered beams, scavenged bricks stacked into walls that collapse under the next gale. Rain barrels that catch the poisonous water, which we boil and filter through layers of charred wood, sand, and faith. Even then the sickness comes, coughs that never stop, skin that peels in strange ways. I tell myself it's just contamination, that the body can endure what the world throws at it. But I've seen neighbors waste away in weeks, as if the rain itself was hollowing them out. Food is worse. Soil no longer grows anything but weeds that seem more venom than plant. I've seen gardens carefully tended, seeds preserved through the years, only to wither in the heat of sudden, violent summers that burn without warning. We scavenge instead, cans with faded labels, dusty jars of pickled vegetables from basements that smell like mold and death. Sometimes we raid the old stores, but there's almost nothing left. Shelves are stripped, rats and insects on what remains. Every meal is theft from the graveyard of the old world. I used to believe the government would return, that order was only a matter of time. But no banners fly now, no broadcasts call for unity. If there are leaders, they are men with guns and women with blades, groups that cling to power by controlling scraps of food, caches of fuel, the promise of shelter. They call themselves things like the Ash Dogs, the Harbor Kings, the Silent March. Names meant to frighten, to remind the rest of us that civilization didn't die. It mutated into something crueler, stripped of law and weighed only by hunger. I've met them on the roads. I still hear the voices. They do not ask for help. They take. They break. They burn what they cannot hold. That's the world now. Survivors at the mercy of raiders, raiders at the mercy of storms, and storms beholden to nothing but the ruin we unleashed when we ignored the warnings. I tell myself there are still people worth finding, still remnants of the old kindness, fragments of the world where neighbors looked out for one another. Sometimes I even meet them, a boy clutching a tin of beans he shares without hesitation, an old woman who sews tarp into cloaks, asking only for a story in return, a family huddled in the ruins of a church who invite me to sit by their candle, even when they have almost nothing left to share. These moments are rare, but they keep me alive more than food does. And yet, survival grows harder every day. It isn't just the storms. It's the air, heavy with ash and humidity so thick it feels like breathing underwater. It's the infections from wounds that never heal because medicine has become rarer than gold. It's the simple exhaustion of living in a world where sleep is always broken by fear. The fear of raiders, of collapse, of a roof being torn away, of the water rising higher than it ever has before. I've learned to ration not just food and water, but hope. You can't burn it all at once. Hope must be measured, spoonful by spoonful, or it runs dry. The scientist in me, I suppose I still call myself that, clings to explanations. Once I lectured in climate science. I ran models. I believed in probabilities. The irony isn't lost on me that I survived the very catastrophe I warned of, while so many who laughed at the numbers drowned in their disbelief. I still run models, crude now, scribbled in journals by candlelight, using data scraped from battered, weather instruments scavenged from abandoned stations. I know, for instance, that the sea has risen nearly 3 meters in the last 15 years. I can track the storms as they form, stronger and more frequent because of the heat trapped in the atmosphere. The numbers confirm what my eyes already see. The tipping points were crossed long ago. We no longer live in the shadow of change. We live in its belly. There's no margin of safety left. Drought followed by storm. Heat followed by fire. Ice gone from the poles, rivers dried to silence, oceans choking on dead zones. This is not a cycle to endure until it corrects. This is the correction. We are the remnants of a failed equation trying to scratch out meaning in a system that has already moved on without us. But still, I endure. I record. I speak into the static, broadcasting to no one, or maybe to someone somewhere who might hear a voice in the darkness and remember that they are not alone. The crisis is not tomorrow. It is not in the future tense. It is now. And every day I step outside, every time I watch the sky boil over with lightning and ash, I know that survival is not a right. It is a defiance. The barrel is almost empty. I tilt it forward and listen as the last slick of water slides across the bottom, no heavier than a whisper. One day's worth, too, if I ration until my lips crack and my tongue feels like leather. I should be used to this by now, the slow countdown of essentials. Water, food, fuel, even firewood. But you never get used to the sound of your lifeline running out. The rain hasn't come in weeks. Not the acidic torrents. Not even the faint drizzle that tastes of metal. Just heat. Relentless, suffocating heat that makes the ground buckle and the air feel like a smothering cloth wrapped tight around the face. In the nights, the winds rise, carrying dust that cuts the lungs and coats everything in a fine, red grit. I wake each morning coughing, my throat raw, my chest tight. And every morning I do the same thing. I check the barrels. I check the traps. I check the road, squinting into the horizon to see if the world has finally decided to send me company or trouble. Most days it's trouble. A week ago I caught sight of the Ash Dogs again. 3 figures moving across the ridge, shadows against a burning sky. I know them by the way they move, slow, purposeful, like wolves testing the edge of the herd. They didn't approach my shelter, not yet, but they know I'm here. The marks they left on a nearby wall made that clear, a dog's skull with ash for eyes painted in soot. Their calling card, their warning. I sleep with the radio at my side now, not for comfort, but as a reminder that I am not just a scavenger clinging to the bones of the world. I still speak into the static every night, my voice breaking through the hum like a confession. It helps to say the words aloud, even if no one hears. Helps me remember that there was a time when connection mattered, but survival takes more than words, and the truth is, my supplies are gone. I've begun burning the last of the furniture, wood warped and rotten, brittle with age, but still enough to feed the small stove I use to boil water. The generator runs only in short bursts now, pedal-driven until my legs give out, its fading hum a ghost of the old world's luxury. Food is worse. 3 cans of beans, 1 bag of rice riddled with insects, and a handful of hard candy that I've been saving as if sugar could be a weapon against despair. The scarcity gnaws at me, but it's not what terrifies me most. What terrifies me are the rumors. They started as faint signals across the radio bands, half sentences, distorted by interference, fading before I could lock onto them. But the words I caught were enough to seed something dangerous inside me. Words like river, words like untouched, words like safe. Somewhere north, the story goes, water still flows. A spring or a river that escaped the poison, shielded by some trick of geology or fate. Survivors have built a community there. Real walls, real food, real shelter. I should dismiss it, another lie in a world that feeds on them. But even lies have power when you're thirsty enough. I've tried to resist. Every lesson I've learned since the fall has screamed against the temptation. Hope is bait. People will say anything to lure the desperate out into the open. But the thought of it claws at me, louder with every empty barrel, every hollow meal. What if it's real? What if I ignore it and die here with dust in my mouth, while somewhere water runs free? The choice is tearing me apart. Stay and waste away slowly. Leave and risk walking into a trap. It isn't just about me anymore, though I have to remind myself of that. The ash dogs aren't circling just because they're hungry. They're circling because they know I have the radio. And the radio in this world is more valuable than gold. It carries voices, information, direction. With it you can summon or deceive, reach allies or lure prey. Without it you're blind. They'll come for it soon. I can feel it. Which means staying isn't safety at all. It's waiting for a knife in the dark. Last night I dreamed of my daughter again. Not the way she was at the end, thin, coughing, her skin yellowed from the sickness, but the way she was before, hair wild from the wind, laughing as she chased our dog through the yard. I woke up with tears on my face, the taste of salt in my mouth, and I thought she would tell me to go. She would say, "Don't die here, waiting for the world to collapse on top of you." The storms are shifting too. I can feel it in the pressure, the heaviness in the air that makes the hair on my arms rise. The last storm carved a canyon through the town center, swallowing entire buildings as if the ground itself decided to open its jaws. The old grocery store I raided last year is gone now, its roof buried in a landslide of mud and concrete. Nothing is permanent anymore, not even ruins, and so I prepare. I pack what little I have. The beans, the rice, the candy, a tarp and a knife. My journal, though I tell myself it's a waste of space. And of course the radio. Always the radio. On my way out, I catch movement near the edge of the road. A boy thin, no more than 12, watching me from behind a rusted car frame. His clothes hang off him like rags, his eyes sharp with the alertness of someone who has survived too long alone. He doesn't speak. He doesn't approach, just watches, then vanishes into the dust before I can call out. I don't know if he's real. Hunger and solitude can make ghosts, but if he is, then I am not as alone as I thought, and that realization is more frightening than comforting. Because the question rises again, trust, or isolation? Is he a child who needs help or bait, sent to draw me out for others waiting nearby? The road north is long, and every step is a gamble. I've heard stories of raider camps, of bridges collapsed into rivers of sludge, of storms that rip skin from bone. But I've also heard the story of water, real water, flowing endless untouched. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if I'll live long enough to find out. But the silence of my empty barrels tells me I don't have the luxury of doubt anymore. I shoulder the pack, I grip the radio, and I walk north into the dust, into the heat, into the waiting teeth of a world that has forgotten how to show mercy. Hope is dangerous, but so is standing still. The sky is wrong. I've seen storms before, seen the way they bloom like bruises across the horizon, the way they stalk closer with growls of thunder and flashes of light. But this is different. This is not a storm. It's a wall. At first I thought it was a dust surge, the kind that scours flesh from bone, grinding down glass and steel into a uniform ruin. But as it drew closer, I saw the colors shift, a roiling blend of rust red and sickly green, shot through with veins of lightning that never touched the ground. The air changed with it, heavy, electric, tasting like metal on my tongue. My hair rose, my skin prickled. It is coming for me. The stories said north was safer, that water flowed, that people still gathered in something resembling community. Maybe it was true once, but right now the only thing ahead of me is this wall of death stretching from one horizon to the other. Behind me is emptiness, the wasted roads, the burned-out shells of towns, the ash dogs who still stalk somewhere in the dust, waiting for a moment of weakness. There's no turning back. Forward is all that's left. I reach a ridge and see it down in the valley, a glimmer. Not of lightning, not of fire, but of water. A ribbon of silver threading through the cracked land, shimmering even beneath the choking sky. For a moment my breath catches. Could it be real? Could the rumors have been true all along? The radio crackles at my side, alive with static. And then voices, broken, stammering, but real. North River safe, hurry, safe. The word pierces me like a blade. I stumble forward, half running, half falling down the ridge toward that impossible sight. Every part of me screams caution. Every lesson from years of loss, betrayal, false promises, and hunger tells me this is a trap, or a mirage, or a death sentence. But thirst and desperation outweigh caution. Hope is heavier than fear. I don't notice the boy until it's too late. He steps from behind the rocks at the valley's edge, thin, ragged, eyes hollow with hunger, the same boy I thought I'd dreamed before. Only now I see he isn't alone. They emerge from the shadows like predators. 5, maybe 6 of them. Men and women with faces streaked in ash, weapons fashioned from scraps of rebar and chain, eyes gleaming with that feral sharpness I've come to know too well. The ash dogs. They'd been tracking me, hurting me, waiting for the moment when the storm would drive me, when the promise of water would blind me. And now here I am, cornered. The boy stares at me, not with malice, not with kindness, but with the flat gaze of someone who has already chosen survival over everything else. His hand tightens on a blade too big for him. The leader steps forward. A tall man, scars etched like maps across his face, teeth bared in a grin that doesn't reach his eyes. He doesn't waste words. He just gestures at my pack. The radio. The only thing I own that matters more than food or water. I shake my head. My grip tightens on it. I know what will happen if I give it up. They'll take me apart piece by piece just to amuse themselves. The radio is my only leverage, my only weapon. Behind them, the storm is almost here. The wall of poison-dark sky towers higher, howling louder, swallowing the horizon. The ground trembles under its weight. Time is gone. This is the moment. I have 2 choices. Surrender the radio and live long enough to regret it, or fight here and now against the ash dogs, against the storm, against the dying world itself. I choose. The radio comes to life in my hand, static shrieking louder than the storm. My fingers twist the dial, searching, begging for something, anything. And for a heartbeat, just a heartbeat, I hear it. We are here. Water flows, come quickly. North safe. The voice is real, a woman's voice. Calm, clear, steady, not broken like a trap, not frantic like bait, real. And then the storm hits. It slams into us with the force of a collapsing mountain. Wind rips the ground apart, throwing shards of rock and glass into the air like knives. The ash dogs scatter, some screaming, some silent as the storm swallows them. The boy is pulled from his feet, vanishing into the darkness. The leader lunges for me, hands clawing, teeth bared, and the wind tears him away, his scream lost to the roar. I hit the ground, arms wrapped around the radio, clinging to it as if it were my child, my soul, the last tether to meaning. The wind lifts me, slams me down, lifts me again. My mouth fills with dust and blood. My eyes burn as if set on fire, and then I feel it. Water, cold, clear, rushing against my side. The storm has driven me into the river, the glimmering ribbon I saw from the ridge. It is real, not a mirage, not a lie. Real water, alive and flowing. I plunge my face into it, drinking like an animal, gasping, choking, laughing through the blood and dust. The taste is pure, not metallic, not poisoned. For the first time in years, I drink water that feels like life. But the storm doesn't care. It tears at me, pulls me deeper into the current, thrashes me against rocks. I fight to hold onto the radio to keep it above the water. My arms ache. My lungs burn. The river drags me forward deeper into the storm's heart. I think of my daughter again. I think of the laughter, the light in her eyes. And I think, if I die here, at least I die knowing the rumors were true. At least I die knowing water still flows in this ruined world. But part of me refuses. Part of me rages. Not yet. Not like this. With the last of my strength, I drag myself toward the bank, clawing at the mud, the roots, the broken stones. The storm roars overhead, furious, unrelenting. But inch by inch, I pull free. I collapse in the reeds, coughing, shaking, soaked in river water and blood. The radio sputters in my arms, alive but fragile. I press it to my ear, desperate, trembling. And there it is again, the voice. We are here, keep moving. You are not alone. Tears blur my vision. My body aches as if broken. The storm still rages, the ash dogs are gone, and the world is no less cruel than it was an hour ago. But something has changed. There is water. There are voices. There is still a reason to keep walking. And for the first time in years, I believe I might not die alone. When I wake, it's with the taste of mud and river silt in my mouth. My body feels as if it's been broken in half, every bone a splinter, every muscle trembling. The storm is gone. Silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence that follows something so massive, so consuming, that the land itself seems stunned. The river gurgles weakly beside me, still flowing, though clogged now with debris, tree limbs, shattered steel, bodies that drift past like pale ghosts. I crawl to my knees. The reeds are bent flat, their stalks pressed into the mud like hair combed by a giant's hand. Above, the sky is not blue. It hasn't been in years, but it is clearer. The sickly green hue has faded into a dull, bruised gray. I can breathe without coughing dust. I can see further than a mile. I survived. Somehow I am still here. The radio lies in my lap, battered, caked in mud, its antenna bent. I cradle it like it's flesh and blood, brushing away the dirt, twisting the dials with shaking fingers. Static answers me first, long and low. But then, like a whisper carried on a dying wind, the voice returns. We are here, keep moving north. You are not alone. I close my eyes, pressing the radio against my forehead. Not alone. 2 words I had stopped believing in long ago. I should be dead. The storm should have ripped me to pieces like it did the ash dogs. I can still see them in flashes, scrambling, screaming, swallowed by the black wall. That boy, his eyes, his silence, was he taken? Did he survive somewhere downstream, clinging to the same river that saved me? I don't know, maybe I never will. The land bears the scar of the storm. Trees uprooted, houses flattened into rubble. The few markers of the old world, road signs, fences, telephone poles, snapped like matchsticks. The smell of ozone lingers, sharp and metallic, clinging to my tongue. I walk slowly, stiffly, every step a negotiation with pain. My ribs ache from the river's battering. My lungs wheeze, but I walk. I follow the ribbon of water because it is real, because it is moving, because it means something still breathes in this dead land. As I go, I think of what this storm means. It wasn't natural, not in the way we once thought of weather. These were not clouds rolling in from the ocean or winds shifting with the season. This was chaos born of imbalance. When you scorch the land long enough, dry it until it cracks, poison the sky with fire and smoke, the planet responds. It lashes out. It doesn't care who lives, who dies. It doesn't have a plan, only fury. But the river that changes things. If water still flows here, then maybe it flows elsewhere. Maybe the old maps mean nothing now, but rivers were lifelines once. They carried people food, hope. They could again. And maybe that voice is real. Night comes quickly, as it always does these days, shadows stretching long, swallowing the earth. I build a small fire from debris the storm left behind, splinters of wood, scraps of plastic. The flames are weak, barely enough to keep away the cold, but they give me light. I sit beside the fire, radio in my lap, listening to the hum of static. My mind drifts to the past. I think of my daughter. Her name was Clara. She had a laugh that could cut through the heaviest silence. I haven't spoken her name out loud in years. It hurts too much, but tonight under this bruised sky I whisper it to the flames. Clara. It feels like a prayer, a confession, a wound. She would have been 16 now, maybe 17. Old enough to have grown cynical, bitter. Old enough to fight, to scavenge. Old enough to survive. But she's gone, taken by fever when the medicine ran out. I still see her face in dreams. Sometimes she's laughing. Sometimes she's coughing blood. Both feel real. For a long time her memory kept me moving. Then it became a weight, something that dragged me closer to the grave with every mile. Tonight, though, something shifts. Her memory doesn't just ache, it steadies me. It tells me not to waste this miracle, not to waste the river, not to waste the voice. I realize something else, too. Survival has been my only goal for so long that I forgot there could be more. A community, a shared fire, a place where voices aren't only static in the night. Maybe it's just another lie, another trap. But what if it isn't? What if she'd want me to believe? The world is still broken. The storm did not heal it. It tore deeper wounds. Towns are flattened. Soil is poisoned. The air still hangs heavy with smoke and rot. But under it all I can feel something stubborn, life clawing back. The reeds still grow. The river still runs. A single bird flits past my firelight, wings ragged but beating. I don't know if the planet can recover. I don't know if we deserve it. But I do know this, the earth is not done fighting. And neither am I. The next morning I set out again. My body screams at me with every step, but the water at my side gives me strength. I ration it carefully, filling scavenged bottles, guarding it like treasure. This is the first time in months I've had enough to drink without guilt, without rationing every drop. As I walk, I test the radio. The voice comes and goes, always faint, always fragmented. North safe, keep moving. Each time it cuts out, my chest tightens, but it always returns. Like a heartbeat, like proof. I pass through the ruins of a town. The storm ripped through here too, scattering bricks and bones across the street. A mural remains on one wall, faded, peeling, but still visible. It shows children holding hands under a sun. I stop and stare at it for a long time. The colors are almost gone, but the image feels like defiance. Someone once believed enough to paint it. I leave a mark of my own. I dip my hand in the river and smear a line of mud across the wall, just beneath the mural. A sign, a promise. Maybe someday someone will see it and know they weren't alone. As the sun dips low again, I climb another ridge. The land stretches out before me, scarred, yes, but alive. The river gleams in the fading light, cutting northward, winding like a vein of silver. Beyond it, the horizon trembles with heat and haze. I don't know what waits out there. Another storm, another trap, another grave. But I also don't know what hope I might find. And for the first time in so long, that unknown doesn't terrify me. The storm broke me open, but it left something inside, something I thought I'd lost forever. Not certainty, not peace, but a spark. I look at the radio, its casing cracked, its antenna bent, its signal faint but steady. I whisper into it, voice hoarse, words carried into static. I'm still here, I'm coming. Keep the fire lit. The night answers me with silence, then with static, then faintly with that voice again. Not alone. For the first time in 150 days, I believe it. The road did not end at the river. It curved, braided, and split into a dozen smaller paths that led to places I could not name. I followed one until the sun sank, and the air cooled enough for my chest to unclench. People moved along those paths, figures bent with fatigue, children whose eyes were dull from too much loss, yet bright with a dangerous curiosity. They came to the water because water is a summons you cannot ignore. When I stumbled into the clearing, they watched me first, then the radio, then the water dripping from my sleeves. There was no cheering, no grand welcome. Hope in this country does not wear banners. Instead, a woman wiped her hands on her apron and handed me a cup. It was barely more than a tin rim and a dent, but the water in it tasted like everything that had been missing. I drank and did not bother to hide the gratefulness on my face. They called themselves the Meridian Collective, not a name stitched to power, but one people chose for the meeting place between tides. They had walls made of scrap and wood and old tires, but what surprised me was how many of them had books, seeds, and bottles labeled with dates. They had a nurse who could draw blood and laugh at the same time, a mechanic who loved old radio parts the way a priest loves scripture, and a schoolroom under a tarp where children learned to count with river stones. They were not a fortress. They were a huddle of defiant selves that had refused to disappear. The river fed them. Wells dug at blind spots where geology hid clean water from the storm's reach. They had ways to purify what came from the sky, filters that tasted of charcoal and patience, a small system of clay and sand and boiled cloth. They planted in beds raised from spoiled soil, adding ash and compost from the kitchens until root and leaf grew stubbornly. It wasn't paradise. The crops were small and worried-looking, the seedlings wilted in heat and then stubbornly straightened. But they lived. I thought of the ash dogs and the storms and the miles of dust behind me. The river had not erased those things. It had simply offered a place where the sum of small decisions mattered more than the weight of disaster. Here, someone fixed the radio when it coughed. Here, people traded not just for goods, but for knowledge. How to treat a fever with a tea brewed from willow bark. How to splice a wire to coax a generator back to life. How to teach a child to count by measuring the sun's shadow. They had a schedule for watch duty. They rationed fuel and seeds like priests ration bread. They also argued like old families, the temper of loss baked into their voices, and laughed in low, sharp bursts when stories circled the fire. I asked what it cost to join. They said there is no price except work and honesty. That honesty is heavier than anything else. You must be willing to tell when you fail, to trade what you can, to guard what is shared. It was not a promise that everyone would be saved. It was a promise that the people there would try, every day, to keep one another alive. That, more than a river, more than a truce with the weather, felt like a lifeline. I decided to stay for a while, not because the world had softened, God knows it had not, but because staying felt like a choice, and that choice felt like defiance. The radio got a corner in the communal tent, patched into a modest solar array the mechanic had cobbled from old panels. In the mornings I gave weather updates and hard tips. How to boil water when your fuel is gone. How to catch dew with a tent flap. How to barter without giving away the only thing you cannot afford to lose, your trust in the next human being. There are realities we will not lie about. The storms will come again. The land will still be capricious. Diseases will find new ways to hurt us. Raiders may return with more cunning. Food will fail some seasons. Children will still lose parents and parents will still bury children. We cannot promise safety. We can promise effort. We can promise to show up. You asked for a final message. Here is mine, filthy with river mud, tired and threaded with conviction. Hold your small lights close. They will be all you have. Tend your gardens, literal and human, because both need water and weeding. Share what you can teach, because knowledge is a seed that travels further than canned food. Barter with dignity. When you must trade, trade skills and time and honesty. Those are the things that rebuild trust faster than coins ever could. Keep lists. Keep names. Tell stories aloud. They stitch strangers into people. Patch radios, fix pumps, teach a child to read the sky. If you have a way to pull clean water, share it but guard it. Teach others and build redundancies. Make your community small enough to know each face and large enough to hold grief when it comes. I do not pretend this is sufficient. The future is brittle and we walk on it like glass. But small practices add up. A repaired pump saves one family this month and 10 the next. A seed packet traded twice becomes a plot of food a year later. A radio call that warns a convoy saves lives, and those survivors carry the knowledge onward, a chain with many links. As for despair, it will visit you. It arrives in the quiet hours, in the memory of those you lost, in the smell of smoke after a fire. Do not pretend it will not, but do not let it be the final voice. Constrain it. Let it teach you what you value most. Then act on it. Turn grief into work, plant a row, teach a skill, mend a roof. Action is how we resist the hunger of despair. When I get on the air now, the signal is clearer. It's sometimes answered by the Meridian Collective, sometimes by callers who have moved on, sometimes only by the wind. I read names on Thursday nights, the names of those who asked to be remembered, because names carry weight. We read lists of supplies and of people missing and of births and of deaths. We say the mundane things, the price of salt, where the next convoy will be, whether the south gate is safe. We say the sacred things. Remember Clara, remember Lena, remember the man who taught us how to splice wire. We keep a ledger on a slate that is handed from one watch to the next. I do not know what will happen next. I cannot promise that the Meridian Collective will endure. I cannot promise that the storms will relent or that the ash dogs will never return. The ledger is not a prophecy. It is a plan to keep trying. It is, in a way, the only kind of hope that makes sense now. Stubborn, incremental, communal. So I end this broadcast not with grand rhetoric but with a practical benediction. Find water, share water, teach someone how to make a filter, write a list with names and dates, repair what you can, radios, pumps, relationships. Keep your lights small and your circles honest. When you can, come to the river. If you cannot, send a signal. If you can do neither, pass on what you know. That is our inheritance now. This voice will go on for as long as the batteries hold and the solar panels sip the sun. I will read those names. I will repeat the advice. I will tell the stories. I will make mistakes and I will apologize and I will try again. If you are listening, if you are breathing, then we are not finished yet. Stay alive, stay human, keep the fire lit.